Hello and welcome. I'm your moderator for today's session, Odalisa Martinez. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about how to correct 5 common portrait painting mistakes. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our speaker. Today we are joined by Caroline Italia Carlson. She's a fine artist, art instructor, illustrator, and owner of a digital marketing firm. As an empath, she loves to encourage others to find their happy place in their studios through her Passionate Painter podcast, live local workshops, and most recently, her new online portrait painting masterclass, The Portrait Code. Caroline has shown her oil painting across the United States and won numerous awards for her work. She focuses on figurative painting and portraiture and has painted portraits for the United States Marine Corps and a formal national spokesman for and agent of the FBI. Caroline is an animal advocate and helps nonprofit animal rescue organizations through her work as often as possible. She also donates her portraits to the families of fallen service members and first responders, including service dogs. Caroline resides in Upper Michigan with her husband and 2 sons. She's also the proud stepmom of an adult son living in California. Take it away, Caroline.
Thanks, Odalisa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I hope you are doing well and staying in good health. So today I want to show you how to correct 5 common mistakes that portrait painters make. But before that, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about how you can shift from wishing that you could paint portraits to becoming a portrait painter. So it's time to shut down your distractions. If you're multitasking, come back to me, because we are about to jump in. All right, a little about me. You just heard my bio. I've been portrait painting for over 30 years, and I've always loved to draw portraits. And in college, I found my direction in painting animals and people, including portraits of both. Hopefully, you also know me as the host of the Passionate Painter podcast. Now, I've always been fascinated by anatomy, and I did a deep dive in college with an internship in the anatomy lab under natural history illustrator Stephen Nash at Stony Brook University. I firmly believe in the power of understanding the underlying structure of what you're painting, and have built a solid module on anatomy for portraiture in my new online course. Before we get to talking about the mistakes, let's talk about your mindset. Your mindset is going to be the thing that makes or breaks your efforts to become a better artist. I firmly believe that the right guide can accelerate your progress, because we also want to put in place a mindset that will draw you towards your goals while repelling self-criticism and doubt that keeps many artists stuck in place. Okay, let me ask you a few questions. Have you always wanted to paint portraits, but think you were standing behind the door when the portrait fairy handed out the magic paintbrushes? Do you defeat yourself with negative self-talk every time you see an artist with tons of talent? Even when you're successful with a painting, do you tell yourself it was a fluke and you're afraid to ruin your winning streak of 1 with a second painting? Okay, so we're going to do a quick poll of those 3 things and see which one is most like you. So it is a common problem that artists think that they might be able to paint something else, a vase of flowers, their pet, anything else but people. Somehow people think that they have this psychological or talent block that prevents them from painting people. And this is not true. And the good news is it's something that you can get beyond. So I'm here to tell you that no matter which thing might be holding you back, I fully support you, and I want to show you how you too can paint portraits. Okay, so let's take a quick trip together into the future. Can you imagine what it would feel like if you could get the results you wanted from your paintings, if you could give portraits as unforgettable gifts, or even sell them? There's a lot of power to connecting through portraiture. Catching someone's likeness makes the viewer stop and wonder at what you've been able to achieve. And when you really nail it, it's not uncommon for a client to cry. If this happens to you, don't assume that you've screwed up. Assume that you've nailed it. Enter the portrait code. Okay, so the portrait code is not only the name of my new online course, it is the name of 3 principles that I have collected around this concept of getting your head into a growth mindset and in the right space to take on the challenges of portrait painting. The principles form an outlook that help you build confidence as you build your skills. We're not waiting to arrive at a destination before we get the confidence. We are building that confidence as we go. Principle number 1, portrait painting is no different than painting anything else. You are not painting a person, you're painting the way light reflects off of an object. Now, this one holds true for anything you're painting. Whatever you're painting light. But the way people short circuit when they're faced with another face looking back at them makes this principle especially important to remember when painting portraits. Principle number 2, persistence is more important than talent every time. The most valuable quality that you need to reach for consistent progress is to have consistent studio time. You've got to keep showing up. Principle number 3, if you did it once, you can do it again. And oftentimes better. This is a universal law as far as I'm concerned. And a short story on this topic is that on the first day of my drawing class in college, the teaching assistant had us draw our best self-portrait efforts without a mirror, no reference, just from our heads. Now, most of us had prior drawing experience, and we were fairly pleased with the results of our first drawing exercise. Then she had us switch papers, and we assumed we were going to critique each other. And then she told us to draw on our neighbor's artwork. And everyone was pretty upset. Now, I don't remember this teaching assistant's name, but I'll never forget her because she wanted to get it through our heads that our abilities come from within, not from some magical place we can't draw from, but from inside of us. And we can draw on that and call on it as often as we want. Imagine you found a spring of water that you could return to again and again for a drink. Your artistic abilities are that spring. All you have to do is keep showing up. Even if that spring is muddied from sitting unused for a while, you can begin to show up again and again, and it's going to start running clean and fast. And the results you get from your painting sessions will get better and better. And you'll also get more efficient, arriving at your desired destination faster and faster. Now, the course I've built is intended to guide you to the results that you're looking for through a collection of modules covering not only the portrait demonstration, but a solid foundation in the basics of making good art, wrapped in a mindset that will help you get to the goal. It helps you get into a growth mindset. I'll give you more details about the course in a little while, but right now I want to walk you through 5 mistakes that you can avoid when you're painting your portraits. Now, instruction can be a game changer, but even with the best guide, the single most powerful way that you can become a portrait painter is to paint portraits. The key is to not wait until you've had enough instruction to try it out. It's important to get comfortable on the journey. Portraiture is a mindset. It belongs to those who step up and claim it by consistently painting. So I want you to remember that. And before we start, the quote of the day: a satisfied life is better than a successful life because success is measured by others, but satisfaction is measured by your own soul, heart, and mind. So the 5 mistakes we're going to look at are: 1, not being bold enough in the beginning; 2, misalignments, meaning that something in your painting is not aligned, making it look off; 3, drawing when you should be painting; 4, tunnel vision; and 5, using black when you don't have to. All right, so let's start out looking at the first mistake, which is not being bold enough. Now you can see here that I have roughed out a portrait, and I do have some values. If you squint, you can see some lights and darks around the eye sockets, but in general, the skin tones around the face are pretty uniform. They're differentiated a bit from side to side, but I need to push more. In order to get this portrait where we want it to go, I need to be able to bump up or push not only the values, differentiating the light from the dark areas, but doing so with not just light and dark, but with color. And when you start to replace some of those values with color temperature in mind, it's going to help you differentiate lighted areas from dark in a way that doesn't kill the life in your painting. So when I see my students begin a painting and get stuck in this muddy place, they might start like this, and that's normal, but they need to keep moving. They get so far and they get stuck and they get scared and they stop. You will see me start to replace some of these darkened areas with darker areas of color, but they have more pigment in them. They have a definitive color temperature. So they might be cool in one area, like this place above the eyebrow. You see, I've obliterated the eyebrow, right? I can't be worried about keeping hold of that eyebrow till later. If it's not right, it's okay to paint right through it because you know where it went. You can still see where it goes, but I'm going to start pushing that chroma and making it, chroma is the intensity of those colors. So working to enhance whether it's warm or cool, making sure it's different levels of lightness and darkness, but with the warm and cool component so that the areas in shadow feel different, look different than the areas in light. And also pushing the chroma. There you go. You're starting to see a highlight on the nose, the eyelids, the brow bone, a little bit brighter color, right? So that's a lighter value, and making sure that we are giving the impression of picking out the light hitting an object. And you have to be bold in the early stages. So this is very important to just push it. And I call this early ugly. And you may hear me say that again later, but you can't be afraid to go in and just be bold in the beginning. It's the best time because you're going to make adjustments later anyhow. But right now, what you're painting is your own roadmap for your portrait. You're saying, oh yeah, there's a reflected light on the side of the nose, right? What does that mean? Well, reflected light is a place where the light isn't maybe directly hitting, but it's bouncing off of something beside the model. So the face might be in shadow on that side, but you're getting this little warm glow on the side of the bridge of the nose. And that's what you see there. I've included a reflected light. So all of these things make a difference to your portrait. And it's important, as you see, I'm punching up the chroma, making it more intense and making it decidedly more warm and cool to differentiate the planes, shifting which ones are coming forward at you, which ones are rolling back towards the fold in the upper eyelid, for example, away from the brow bone. It's going to get darker towards that crease. The side of the nose in shadow, while including, as you can see on the side of the nose there, a little highlight for that reflected light. So it's this combination of playing with shadow, reflected light in the shadows, so it's not a dead shadow, and the highlights and the warmth of the side of the face that's lit. So this is what I mean about getting bolder in the beginning. Push, push, push. Okay. Mistake number 2, the eyes are not lined up in this case with each other at the inner corners. This is a misalignment problem. Now, it doesn't look so extreme when you look at it right now, but if we start this demonstration, you can see if I draw a line across the eyes that the left eye corner is lower than the right, which you see on our model, the corners of the inner corner of the eyes are lined up with each other. Now, this is important because no matter what the angle is of the eyes on the outer edges, she's got beautiful almond-shaped eyes that curve up a little bit. The inner corners will always align with each other across the bridge of the nose. No matter what angle that head is on, those inner corners should stay lined up. And if you don't have that, it's going to look off, and you might not know why, but that may be the cause, in which case you can hold up your brush in the air as a line, as a ruler measurement, and see if the eyes are catching through at the same place on both eyes across the bridge of the nose. And I say catching, I mean whatever angle you're tilted on for those eyes, tilt your brush and see if it crosses through the corners in the same spot across the bridge of the nose. So to fix this, what you see me doing is going in around the eyes and just repainting them. Don't worry that you had it down, it was done. If it's not right, it's not right, and it doesn't count. You can't, I'm not saying be perfect. I'm saying aim for structural correctness over clinging to something that is quote unquote done, because if it's not right structurally, it's going to look funny, it's going to look off. So it's important to be brave and go back in there and indicate the angle that you need. Repaint the rims of the eyes until the corners line up with each other. See, now I'm adding in some lights and darks, but across the nose, the bridge of the nose, the corners of those eyes need to line up with each other. And that's what we end up with. So that's a better start right there. Okay, mistake number 3, outlining features with lines. And this is what I mean when I say drawing when we should be painting. Let's take a look at what this looks like. Now I'm going to show you drawing on the painting, but the way that we need it to be. There's a temptation when people are starting out, especially to do portraits, by outlining things like the features, things like around the eyes, the sides of the nose. They'll draw little comma shapes on the sides of the nostrils. The place you want to progress to is, yes, indicating those outlines, quote unquote, but as the shadows, the folds in the eyelid, for instance, where it rolls into the brow ridge that's coming down to it, is a fold. It's not a line. The place next to the nostrils where people see those little comma lines, that's due to the dent or the shadow created alongside the nose. So you want to indicate those shadows, but make them soft and make them wider than the thinnest line you could paint. We're not looking to draw lines. We're looking to use a dashed broken line that's a little wider, as you see here, indicate those areas of shadow. And it's a little softer. It's not going to be some black outline, right? We're not looking to outline. We're looking to indicate shadow. The key that will separate your painting from being a beginner and moving on to the next stage that you need to get to is when you take the skin tone from either side of that line, because it's not a line, it's a fold, and you start painting over the line you drew to thin it down. This is the key. So what it means is you're not actually drawing lines in the end. You are indicating shadows and creating that line of the fold in the skin by cutting into it. It's called cutting in. So now you'll see it on the left-hand eye. I'm indicating my lines. You see I've indicated a fold there on the eyelid. And then I'm going to take a brush with the skin tone and paint back the skin tone on either side of that fold to make it thinner line. You'll see me doing it here. I'm adding skin tone back and cutting into the thick lines right there. See, it's thinning out. It's not thinning out because I'm drawing it thin. It's thinning out because I'm cutting into it with tiles of paint to make it thinner. You're cutting away at that shadow. And that's how we want to do our portraits. Cut away at your shadows, make them irregular, make them broken. If you look now, the fold between the eyelid and the roll of skin that comes up to the brow ridge is a broken line that looks more like a fold than some continuous uniform line. That is what you're aiming for. Cutting in. Draw over the shadows and narrow them down to where you want them to be, keeping them dashed and irregular. And that's how we get to the way you want it to look. Okay, mistake number 4, tunnel vision. What I mean here is that the first time I did this portrait, I liked it. And you see it above. It was a pretty girl. It's not my model. And it's important to be willing to make the changes that you need to make if you're a portrait artist. If you're not, it might not matter, right? If you are painting someone's portrait, you are going to want to make the adjustments that you must make to make this look like your model. So what is required here? In this case, the problem I had was that I made her eyes too small for her particular anatomy. Her particular eyes are great big brown eyes, and they're a little more close set than you see in the painting on the top. Again, really nothing technically wrong with it, except her eyes are closer together and they're bigger. So in order to make it look like my model, I had to be brave enough, even though the painting was technically done, to go back in. And here I am going back in and making those eyes bigger. And be brave enough at any stage in your painting, if when you find out something's wrong, to fix it. That line is to make you aware, remind you that we're painting on an angle here. So you see some distortion. It's not because the painting is way off in perspective. It's because the camera is now on the side of the easel. Again, we're not talking about being a perfectionist. I'm talking about structural correctness and to make sure that you're sticking to making your model look like your model, because even if it's a nice looking person, if you're doing portraiture, you're going to find that the family's going to be pickier than that. They want it to be their person, right? So, in this case, in order to make the eyes bigger, I painted them out from the inside. I took the space I needed from the bridge of the nose. I painted from the colored part, the irises, inward, and made those eyes larger, taking away from the bridge of the nose. And I made the outer edges of the eyes, the whites, bigger from the inside out, pushing out to make the insides of the eyes bigger, pushing away the skin to open them up more. So that's what you have going on here to make this correction. And this is, again, it's important to be brave like this to get your likeness. And as you can see, it required me also to readjust the position of the irises so that they weren't then too far apart. Since I made more space, I made the eyes bigger on the inside. So unfortunately, if the eyes are too small and you need to move them closer together, everything has to be corrected. Colored part has to move to the right place if you're going to reorient the eyes in general. So there's, again, the difference between them, but the bottom one now looks like specifically my model. Mistake number 5, using black when you don't have to. Okay. It's important to learn to make darks with the darkest colors on your palette. There, again, just reminding you of the angle that we're viewing this on. Your darkest colors are going to be found around the rims of the iris in most cases, and in your pupils, of course. Thing number 10,081, the inside of the nostrils should not be the darkest place on your portrait. It should be something that's warm, that's on the darker side, but not the darkest. So in this case, what you're looking at is a mixture of the darkest colors on my palette. And you can see on the swatch section of the screen, you've got on the brush skin tone colors that show you on the top half what is used to mix the skin tone itself. The bottom half of this skin tone palette shows you what is used to make shadows. And I took the darkest elements in this mix to make the darkest colors. You can see me now using it around the rims of the irises, the colored part of the eyes, and the pupils, and smudging it into where the lashes go. We do not want to indicate eyelashes with too dark of a color. So your goal here isn't really to reach for black. You shouldn't probably have anything quite that dark. And I have done entire paintings with hair or even an animal that's black, a black dog in one case, without using black at all. And it can be done with a mixture of dark tones of paint that achieves a very dark value that maintains the chroma, the intensity of that color. It doesn't kill your color the way black will. Now, Payne's Gray is a good tool for this. First, I recommend using the darkest colors on your palette. Like I said, your alizarin crimson, your ultramarine blue is going to give you a nice dark purple. If you add to that a raw umber, which is considered a version of yellow, then you're going to end up with a dark, dark color. If it's still not dark enough, you can hit it with Payne's Gray. And Payne's Gray is a highly pigmented gray that's very useful for this purpose. It is a cool color. So it's important to remember that in case you need to warm it up. But it will darken your colors without killing your chroma, your intensity. So it's a good tool if you need it. So that's what you see me doing here, is adding back in smudges where the eyelashes are. You don't want to paint those in individually in most cases, sometimes a little, but you don't want to pick out every eyelash. And darkening the values in the eyes. And so that's the finished portrait, and that is my model, Megan. And now it looks like my model. We've got the eyes closer to each other and at the size that she really has her eyes at. Okay. So I hope that was helpful to you. You know, this is important to me because I want to give you a boost and give you something you can take with you right after this webinar and apply to your paintings. Now, I'd like to show you the course I've created in case you want to use it as a guide to get where you want to go. And the way I see it, from here, you've got two options. Option one is you can move forward on your own without a system and a mindset like this, but you do run the risk of finding yourself in the same place a year from now if you don't make any progress, needing to find and tap into numerous sources to get all of the corrective information that you may be seeking, all of the instructional information, and possibly spending more than necessary. Option two, you 100% commit to stepping into your role as a confident portrait artist, using the portrait code to guide you. You build your confidence as you build your skills with thorough guidance. You have lifetime access to the course anytime that you need a refresher, and you have an affordable payment solution so that you can get the answers you need without breaking the bank. Now, don't get me wrong. I will be the first to tell you that there are many ways to walk through this journey. I am not the only instructor out there, but I can tell you that I made this course to give you everything that you need in one place at a very affordable price, so that as many artists as possible will have access to it. Now, let me tell you why I created this course. In addition to giving everybody access through making it affordable, the structure of the course was very important to me. I designed it to take the pain out of learning portraiture. When I began to look for a solution, when I decided to go back into painting after getting into the corporate world, I found that I couldn't find one solution to all of my questions, to all the instruction I needed in one place with a high quality course, especially one that addressed the mindset piece at all, specifically for artists. So I've pulled this together with that in mind. I wanted to give you all the different fundamentals without having to look up, where can I find out about perspective? Well, what about composition or color theory? All of that, all the work is done for you and pulled together here in a very comprehensive course. And what I want to prevent is you having to watch me paint for hours live time, listening to dead air or music, even worse, waiting for snippets of advice here and there. I've had that experience with other instructional videos, and it's really frustrating. The demonstration videos in this course were made to save you from this exact frustration. You'll get quality commentary throughout every demonstration so that you're getting value for the time you're spending. Now, your time is valuable to me, and I assume even more valuable to you. If you've got time to take one course in portrait painting, I recommend this one. I built it for you. Now, time's going to pass either way. So the question is where you want to be next year, this time, and what's the most efficient way to get there? So here are the benefits of this course as far as your takeaways. It's going to take the fear out of learning the basics like perspective and anatomy, color theory. You're going to be able to learn to catch yourself when you make mistakes and get yourself back on track. And that alone is a very valuable tool to be able to assess as you go and have a structure about it that helps you keep yourself on track. You will get specific lessons on painting features, eyes, hair, nose, mouth, and those are important. But you're also going to get instruction on everything about color theory, chroma, value, temperature, and you're going to gain confidence while you develop your painting skills, in addition to all of these fundamentals. So let's look at the exact modules. Now, module 1 is the confidence module. This is the one where you're going to address the things that hold you back, like the imposter syndrome and feeling vulnerable, fear of rejection. There's going to be all different approaches and ways to look at what's holding you back and how you can turn it around and either move through it or use it as a tool, using fear as a barometer. The fundamentals of design. I walk you through masterpieces throughout the ages to see how other artists put 8 design fundamentals to work for them. Armatures of composition. I will decode the terms golden triangle, golden ratio, golden spiral. They sound like pasta dishes, don't they? And show you how you can use them and their proportional frameworks to create strong, captivating compositions, and how other artists have done this again through art history. It's nice to make the connections to how other artists were thinking about all these things as they created their work. Perspective. Perspective intimidates a lot of people. And while you may not necessarily be looking to think about perspective in a portrait painting, it's important to understand it, especially indoors. I don't know how many people have told me, my students, that they have taken perspective class and you see that assignment where you're drawing a street of skyscrapers. That's nice. But the last thing you want is your model on top of a skyscraper, right? So I've given you examples of creating a cityscape and how that works, but then putting people into the landscape in case you want to paint a portrait of a model outdoors. I've done that and it's a lot of fun. I've also translated them to how perspective works when your model is indoors and given you plenty of explanation and diagrammatic models to decode it for you. Color theory. I'll walk you through Munsell's color system of hue, saturation, value, temperature. And this is important because we're going to look at it through on-screen exercises so that you can learn how you can use temperature control and values as a secret weapon. Anatomy. I'm going to show you what you need to know about the bones and muscles of the face so that you can understand the structure of what you're painting when you paint your portrait. And it's important because knowing what's underneath the surface when you're painting your portraits is going to be a key to helping you determine what may be wrong with your portrait if you get stuck. Mixing non-muddy skin tones. This is important because it's going to show you a tried and true approach to determining your model skin tone and their undertone, then choosing your palette and mixing your colors with confidence. Even when we go over mixing skin tones, my students will come to me and say, but I don't know what my model skin tone is. So you've got to start there, and we cover that. We have a gridding demonstration so you can learn about how to transfer your drawing onto your surface. And I also give you through this course 2 other methods that you can choose from. And finally, a portrait demonstration with over 24 short videos that will take you through the entire process with not only demonstrations of me painting, but animations and models along with them in order to continually explain what I'm doing, as well as that swatch palette that changes depending on what I'm working on to give you an idea of what's on my brush, what are the mixes, and what you use to darken or dull them. And I think that's a very valuable thing to have. So looking at all of this content, it's a very thorough course. And it's my goal for my students to have tons of value for the price, which leads us to the question, what does this cost? Based on the value of the content, I realized I could charge at least $1,200 for the course, but the course doesn't cost near that much. As I mentioned, if I'm going to charge you for anything, I'm going to over deliver so that you have no doubt you've invested wisely and you get all the information I can think of to give you. So I want to show you the bonuses quick. We've got bonuses in 3 categories, and one of them is technique, one of them is business, and one of them is studio. What you're looking at here is the first of the technique section. It is a checklist of common mistakes that you can avoid while making your portraits. Then we've got notes on clothing and jewelry for different skin tones and undertones. We've got the composing ebook that goes along with the composition module. And this one is great because it's downloadable and it gives you all of the armatures that you get with the composition module in order to print them out, and you can draw your composition sketches right on top of the armatures to make sure you're factoring in the elements of strong composition as you go. I've got a downloadable about posing your model, things to look for, things to avoid to keep your composition strong and your pose interesting so it's not stiff. We've got a direct sketch video demonstration. This is one of the other examples of how to get your drawing or idea onto your canvas. And we've got that non-muddy skin tone guide. Now this comes with the course. So in addition to talking about this thoroughly in the module on skin tone, you've got a guide that provides skin tone recipes, if you will, and ideas of places to start, as well as connecting the color wheel to actual pigments most people use to paint portraits so that you can have a better idea right in front of you what color to pick to darken or dull the colors in your skin tone. Now, I want to take a minute to tell you I am not the exception here. I've had students who assumed I grew up sprinkling magical portrait dust on my cornflakes. Nope. In fact, I was in a group show in California many years ago, and I have to admit I was feeling pretty proud of myself. The painting I had entered in the show was the best work I had yet, and I was patting myself on the back. And then I saw the guys work in the booth beside me, and I just thought I'd die. It was everything I wanted my work to be and wasn't. And it made me feel like a complete amateur at the time. To make matters worse, I asked him how on earth he was able to paint like that. And I'm thinking this guy's going to give me a line on the nearest, painting pixie and magic wand. And to my absolute annoyance, he looked at me like I had 2.5 heads, and he shrugged and said, "The only way to get there is to paint." Now, at the time, I can tell you I was tempted to say, "Thank you, Captain Obvious." But while he was right that you are the only one who can keep showing up and doing the work, no matter how many courses you buy, including mine, I can also tell you today that having the right guidance is priceless. I don't want you to have to flop around in the soup for guidance like I did to get the progress that you need to get. Getting it from many, many sources and spending money on each separate source and really hunting and pecking. I want to streamline your progress so that you can get on a clear path with complete, well-rounded information. Now, to that end, I've also included items in the business bonuses. One of them is how to spot a scammer checklist for artists. And I have encountered scammers, as I'm sure you probably have by now too. But I've got an ebook to help you avoid being scammed specifically as an artist. I've got a time tracker to help you keep track of the time that you put into your portraits, because if you're going to get to a point where you're charging for your portraits, in order to do that, you need to account for all the time you've been spending on the painting, in addition to the material expenses and the ethereal value of your work. So this will help you account for that. We've got a model release template. Now, this template is something that I use to make sure that if I'm painting a model, I retain the rights to use that likeness in promotions so that I can market my work, especially if you have a website or you want to have a website of your own. And we've got the pricing formula that I use. Now, there are other pricing formulas out there, but this gives you a place to start. I found this one works well for me because it incorporates linear inches instead of square inches, and you can use whatever's comfortable for you. Part of building your confidence is going the way that you feel comfortable. But for me, using linear inches provides a smooth transition through the sizes of your paintings so that you don't have a big price jump from size to size, because your clients will ask, why is a 10 by 12 so much more money than an 8 by 10, for example? And if you're using square inches, that can happen more easily. So it's important to, again, work with what you're comfortable with and what you understand, but this is a flexible formula that uses something you can adjust. There's flexibility here, and you can adjust the different areas that are incorporated into the formula to get pricing that you are comfortable with. Now, before we move on, I want to just mention a guarantee. You may be wondering, what if I buy the course and it doesn't work for me? I do offer a money-back guarantee, but I have to say I'm not looking for people who want to watch instructional videos without putting them into practice. That's not going to help you get where you want to go. That's like watching someone else work out and wondering why you don't have washboard abs, right? So I'm convinced if you consistently practice your skills and the principles and techniques in this course, that your portrait painting skills will steadily improve and your confidence will along with it. Now, if you do buy the course and you do the work and you're not satisfied, I will ask you to show me the work you've done and that you've given the portrait code a try before issuing a refund. You can get more information on the refund at passionatepainteracademy.com in the frequently asked questions section at the bottom of that page. I also want to take a minute and tell you, please don't treat your brushes like this. I know it's a stock image, but seriously, my students that come in with brushes that are dead like this with dried paint on them, we actually they have to suffer through like a brush funeral in my workshops. If they show up like this, it makes me cry. Okay, last section of bonuses, we have got lighting your model. This is important because there are certain ways that will help you and certain ways that will hinder you when you're making your portraits, because you don't want your lighting to be too washed out and eliminate all of your shadows. You don't want it too stark where your shadows are just dark and lifeless. You want a combination of lighting and reflected light. So this shows you 3 different optimal ways to light your model, and it will show you where to put the hardware, where to put your lights compared to where you're sitting your model, compared to where you're putting the camera. Setting up your studio. I talk about the important items that you need to set your studio up, the happy configuration, like when you have a kitchen, right? And you have that magical triangle in your kitchen of sink, fridge, and stove. We're talking about easel, palette, where your lighting's going to be, that kind of thing, brush holder. So this is very helpful. And I talk about what kind of lighting that you need in order to be able to paint your best portrait. And finally, a DIY brush holder. This is my ultimate favorite brush holder because it holds all my brushes and it's fairly long. It's probably 2.5 feet long. And it's only about 6 inches wide, but it's wide enough to be stable. And it's narrow enough to fit on a windowsill. So it's great. It fits on my palette surface without taking up too much space. And I show all the steps to get there and make one of your own with household items. Okay, so now we're getting into the actual price of this course. And we're looking at a single pay price where you get all of this for $337, lifetime access, or a 4-pay payment plan where you can make 4 payments of $99.25 for a total price of $397. In either case, it's convenient and it's a lifetime ownership. So as we move on to your questions, I'd like to invite you to join me inside of the portrait code. And it's available now for purchase. You can get to it by the big orange button at the top of the page at passionatepainteracademy.com. And the URL is here at the bottom of the page. And I do want to tell you that while I believe in my heart this course is worth its weight in gold, my goal is to make it accessible. It truly is the course that I wish I could have found when I was looking to take my portrait painting skills to the next level. Okay, it is frequently asked questions time. Curiosity didn't kill the cat, it made the pig fly. I know it's hokey, but that's my statement, so we're going with it. All right, let's get your questions answered.
All right, awesome. If you guys have any further questions, just please put it in the chat. I see we got one question here. Someone would like to know, will they get immediate access to all the lessons and the modules?
Yes. The course is actually available now. And when you sign on, what's going to happen is you can go right to it with the big orange button at the website we've given you, passionatepainteracademy.com. And once you complete the purchase, you will get a confirmation link in your email that will, when you click it, it will have you create a login for the Teachable platform where the course lives. And you can get in there. You are not required to go in a particular order, and it does not drip. I do not want to make you have to wait. If you want to jump around and say, jump right into anatomy, wherever you want to look, you can move around and get the instruction that you need at the speed that you want to.
Awesome, great. I see another question came in here. How long does it take to complete the portrait code?
That's a good question. It's about 9 hours of content. I'm adding another bonus lesson right now that I just thought of. So I'm going to be adding to your bonuses as I think of them in your resource section. If I think of something or I'm offering something with my podcast, I'll be putting it up in the dashboard for you guys as well, because you're my people. So it takes about 9 hours, but again, you can start seeing results immediately in that as you go through a lesson, you can immediately apply what you're learning to the next portrait that you start. And that's the exciting part, is you're going to be on a continuum of improving your skills as you go. You don't have to wait for some down the road improvement. It might not be overnight results, meaning you're not going to be an expert overnight. You might be, but you're going to have steady results if you just keep moving forward and keep showing up.
All right. Awesome. So here's another question. Do you recommend a specific place to buy your art products online?
Okay. Online, I go to different sources, and I do have a few that I like. One of them is Cheap Joe's Art Supplies. I do sometimes go to hobbylobby.com, but sometimes if you're buying paint, you're better off going directly to the website of the paint manufacturer, especially if you want a specific color and you can't find it. Say, I'm giving Hobby Lobby as an example because that's the local store where I like to go in person if I want to actually, touch the brushes like you're not supposed to. I recommend going directly to the paint manufacturer if there's a specific color that you need, like Old Holland. Okay, they make an English red that's a beautiful color, and some things will be manufacturer specific, and that might be the most direct source. I get actually a lot of my paint materials, meaning my brushes and my panels, oftentimes at Hobby Lobby. And while they're a retailer, the important thing about them, and you can probably find a local Michael's store too if you're in a larger city, which is where I used to shop, they often give a 2-for-1 sale or a 50% off sale. So even though brushes are usually the most expensive thing, you often can find and actually feel the brushes and make sure they're springy at a sale, at a significant sale. And that's one reason I don't usually buy brushes online, because I've done that before and they're supposed to be fantastical brushes. But when I get them, they don't have any pushback. So they're just collapsing onto the surface of my paint. And that bothers me. So I like to go and get myself into usually a synthetic hybrid hog's hair brush that has a good spring to it. So in some things, brushes especially, I recommend, if you can get to a store, I recommend feeling the brushes yourself.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question here. Someone would like to know, they're fairly new to painting. How can they benefit from this course?
Okay, that's a very good question. And I think that I do recommend that you at least have picked up a paintbrush before. I think it's important to have moved the paint around a little bit before you get into this. But if you're fairly new, that's great. And the reason is you don't have a lot of bad habits to break. So it's a good course to start out with, in that it's going to tell you the approach to make specifically when you're painting portraits that will get you down the right path to the most efficient results as quickly as possible. And I recommend it for beginners, because my students come in person in my workshops and they're making mud and they're using brushes that are too small and they're using black and all these things. You can just take all that pain away by starting with the right guide.
All right. And we got another question here. Do you ever destroy your work when dissatisfied, or do you put it aside and revisit it after a period of time?
I would like to say I've never destroyed a piece of work. I have done that. I'm going to say it was an accident. But for the most part, no, I don't usually destroy them unless they're really old, like from college. And, at this point, space is a consideration. Normally what I do nowadays, if I like the painting or the concept of the painting partially, is I go back into it. I wait till it dries. You'll find old masters who have repainted. You can x-ray old paintings and find they've completely blotted out a painting and done something on top of it. So for the most part, I do have paintings that I've made drastic changes on over time. I had one painting that was a self-portrait, life-size self-portrait. It's actually the one on the sign-up page when you buy the course. It's a painting of me in my studio with brushes in my hand, looking over my shoulder at you. And I actually aged it. So it won awards when I made it, but I wasn't happy with it. But it did well in the show circuit, but I just wasn't happy with it, right? So I actually went back to it like 2 years ago, and I redid the portrait because I wanted to look in the mirror and make corrections. But you know what? I had aged, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I aged the portrait. So I like it better now because I feel like my experience in how to paint is there. And now, even though, okay, so I'm 30 years older in the painting, but I like it. I do recommend, though, if you're going to make that drastic a change and the painting has been successful somewhere, you're probably better to just make a new one. You can make another painting of the same subject. It's a good way to learn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's squeeze another really quick question here. Do you do any in-person teaching?
Yes, I teach in person in my new hometown of Escanaba, Michigan. So through the Boniface Fine Arts Center, they hold workshops, and I teach figure painting and portrait painting workshops at the Boniface, and sometimes other workshops. I taught one also on color temperature. So basically, I jump around subjects depending on what the students want to learn.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
with that, if you want to wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me for this webinar. It's been a pleasure to share my time with you and talk about my favorite thing, portrait painting. Please remember that there are many ways to walk your path as an artist. I am not the only instructor out there, but I made this course to give you everything in one place in a high quality, clear format at a very affordable price to help you take big leaps in your skills. And if you choose one course to help you move forward on your quest to become a portrait painter, I hope it's this one. And if you choose one guide to help you get there, I hope it's me. Thanks.